Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're studying the words of the Buddha in volume 13, chapters 81 through 89. This is the last class of the Pali Canon and English study group for this iteration. And then next Saturday, I'm going to be starting from the very beginning, which is volume 2, chapters 1 through 10. And while you don't need to start at the beginning of this Pali Canon and English study group, it's surely nice that you have this opportunity to start from the very beginning. So if you're planning to join starting next Saturday, this is a great opportunity for you to start the Pali Canon and English study group, even though people can start it at any point. It's a 1.5-year program where I'm going through volumes 2 through 13, 10 chapters a week. And when we end on kind of a chapter or a set of chapters like we are today, where there's less than 10, we just do less than 10 chapters. So I'd like to welcome all of you, whether you're joining for the first time or you've been joining regularly. Welcome to our class today. If you're joining through Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you're going to be able to ask any and all questions that you like by putting those into the comment section, and I'll be able to see those, and then I'll be able to answer any questions that you have. For those of you guys that are in Zoom, you can actually electronically raise your hand as well, and you can ask any questions you like. You can also volunteer to read if there's anybody in Zoom that would like to volunteer to read any of the chapters, because the way that we do this program is that I display the chapters from the book on the screen, and then either someone in Zoom or myself will end up reading this specific chapter. Then I will share some teachings on that particular chapter just for about 5 minutes or so, and then open up to any and all questions that you guys have. This is more of a study group where students have already perhaps maybe studied these chapters, or they've studied a particular foundational program with me at different times, and they kind of move into the Pali Canon and English study group after they've got a nice foundation in the teachings of the Buddha. But if this is your first time joining and you've never studied the teachings of the Buddha ever, you'll surely gain some benefit from spending some time learning the teachings. And if you haven't actually read these chapters, it's okay. We're going to read them in the class. But what you have in these chapters is you have the original words of the Buddha all the way throughout the chapter. Then you have the reference, which takes you back to the Pali Canon, so you can see from the original source text where this actually comes from, because this is an excerpt. Then you actually have the words from me, some reflections to be able to help you to understand what it is that the Buddha is teaching. Even though he teaches very clear, very concise, and very precisely, it helps to have someone who's an experienced practitioner and teacher to be able to guide you through, because some of these teachings, they are connected to other teachings. And if you haven't studied the totality of his teachings, you may not understand how one teaching connects to the other. So having an experienced teacher and practitioner walk you through will really help you. So what I'm going to do is open up to see if there's anybody in Zoom who would like to volunteer to read this first chapter, 81. And then after it's read, then I'll come in with some teachings afterwards. And then I'll open up to any and all questions that you guys have. It looks like Yusuf is volunteering to read. Would you like to read, sir?
Yeah, of course. First, good afternoon. And now I will start.
Excellent.
Developing and I can start, right?
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Yusuf.
Developing and cultivating a mind of loving kindness and practicing the way of ascetic. In that case, monk, you should train yourself thus. My mind will be firm and well settled internally. Rising evil and wholesome state will not obsess my mind. Thus, you should train yourself. When monk, your mind is firm and well settled internally, and a rising evil and wholesome state do not obsess your mind, then you should train yourself thus. I will develop and cultivate the liberation of the mind by loving kindness, make it a vehicle and a basis, carrying it out, consolidate it, and properly undertake it. Thus you should train yourself. When a monk, this concentration has been developed and well developed by you in this way, then you should train yourself thus. I will develop and cultivate the liberation of the mind by compassion, the liberation of the mind by sympathetic joy, the liberation of mind by equanimity, make it a vehicle and basis, carry it out, consolidate it, and properly undertake it. Thus you should train yourself. He sees himself purified of all these evil and wholesome states. He sees himself liberated from them. When he sees this, joyfulness is born in him. When he is joyful, joy is born in him. In one who is joyous, the body becomes tranquil. One whose body is tranquil feels pleasure. In one who feels pleasure, the mind becomes concentrated. He resides, filling one quarter with a mind filled with loving kindness. Likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth. So above, below, around, and everywhere. Unto all as to himself, he resides, filling the all-encompassing world with a mind filled with loving kindness, abundant, distinguished, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. He resides, filling one quarter with a mind filled with compassion, with a mind filled with sympathetic joy, with a mind filled with equanimity, abundant, distinguished, immeasurable, without hostility and ill will. Suppose there is a pond with clear, agreeable, cool water, transparent with smooth banks, delightful. If a man scorched and exhausted by hot weather, weary, parched and thirsty, came from the east or from the west, or from the north or from the south, or from where you will, having come upon the pond, he would quench his thirst and his hot weather fever. So too, monks, if anyone from a clan of nobles goes forth from the home life into homelessness, and after encountering the teachings of discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata, develops loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, and thereby gains internal peace, then because of that internal peace, he practices the way proper to the aesthetic. I say, just if a mighty trumpeter were with little difficulty to make a proclamation to the four quarters, so by the cultivation and development, Vasitha, by this liberation of the mind through loving kindness, through compassion, through sympathetic joy, through equanimity, he leaves nothing untouched, nothing unaffected in the sensuous sphere. Monks, when the liberation of mind by loving kindness has been pursued, developed, and cultivated, made a vehicle and a basis, carried out, consolidated, and probably undertaken, 11 benefits are to be predicted. What 11? 1. One sleeps well. 1 awakens with joy. 1 does not have bad dreams. 1 is pleasing to human beings. 1 is pleasing to spirits. Heavenly beings protect 1. Fire, poison, and weapons do not injure 1. One's mind quickly becomes concentrated. One's facial expressions is serene. 1 dies unconfused, and if 1 does not penetrate further, 1 fares on to the Brahma world. When monks, the liberation of the mind by loving kindness has been repeatedly pursued, developed, and cultivated, made a vehicle and phases, carried out, consolidated, and probably undertaken, these 11 benefits are to be predicted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Yusuf. So here the Buddha is talking about what's referred to as the Brahma Viharas, or the 4 healthy mental states of loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. These are healthy mental states that need to be cultivated in the mind in order to counteract or remedy or provide a solution to specific problems that are in the mind. So, for example, loving kindness is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. It's active goodwill towards all beings. This is remedying all the anger, hatred, ill will, any kind of frustration, agitation, annoyance. Even the slightest dislike is eliminated from the enlightened mind, where you don't dislike other beings. Right now, you might find that you have dislike towards certain people. You might like certain people and you dislike others. And this is based on your cravings, desires, attachments. Oftentimes in the unenlightened mind, with a lack of wisdom, we think that this dislike that's in the mind is being caused by the other person, and the other person is doing something wrong, so to speak. But in reality, it's the mind's craving, wanting this person to be a certain way, craving permanence, and not everybody's going to function the same way. And if you can only love beings who you agree with and who do things the way you want, then you can probably only love yourself, because it's only you that's going to be doing things a certain way. So if you get rid of your cravings, desires, attachments with breathing, mindfulness, meditation, and generosity, and you arise this loving kindness will counteract the anger, hatred, ill will, and all those lesser versions like frustration, irritation, annoyance, the hostility, the bitterness, where the mind won't even have the slightest dislike towards other beings. And of course, that's not where you're at right now, but that's what you would like to ultimately work towards. So if you understand what loving kindness is and you practice loving kindness meditation, this is going to rewire your mind to be loving and kind. And now through that meditation, your mind becomes more loving and kind. And as the Buddha is describing here, that the mind becomes liberated, where the mind is no longer obsessed. That oftentimes when the mind is holding on to anger and hatred, the mind might think that you're getting back at the other person. You might hold a grudge against somebody and think that somehow this is going to teach them a lesson. But in reality, it's just harming your own mind. It's kind of like holding a hot coal in your hand, trying to burn somebody else, but it's only burning yourself. So the Buddha is describing here is the way to get free from this anger and hatred and ill will and all those lesser versions is to cultivate loving kindness. And it's loving kindness meditation that does that. But then you also need to practice loving kindness through your intention, speech, and actions. You wouldn't be able to just meditate away your anger, hatred, and ill will. That's part of the practice that's going to help you to be able to eliminate your anger, hatred, and ill will. But ultimately, it's going out into the world and through your intention, speech, and actions, becoming more loving and kind based on the Eightfold Path, that you're then actually transforming the mind in a real sense, because now you can be loving and kind on a day-to-day basis with the individuals that are around you. And then the Buddha goes in further and he talks about compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. These are also part of the Brahma Viharas, or the 4 healthy mental states. And that when you are developing these in the mind, it's a getting rid of certain pollutions in your mind. And that's why the Buddha is saying here that concentration is developed in the mind, and that the mind is liberated or free from these strong feelings. So what compassion is it's the concern for the misfortune of others. So that would be the middle way, where sometimes what people might be practicing is just the opposite of compassion, where there's this indifference, where you see somebody's having an unfortunate situation and they're experiencing some misfortune, and you might just be like, oh, who cares? I don't care. That's their karma. Who cares? Right? And that is not what you're interested in practicing. That would be the opposite side of compassion. Well, there's this other side that oftentimes people are practicing as well, which is just as destructive to the mind, which is you might be having worry or anxiety about the world. When you see that kids are lacking food or they're impoverished, or you might see a war break out in the world, you might be worried or having anxiety about this. This is holding on to the world and wanting the world to be a certain way, the craving, desire, attachment. So if you live on either side of this, your mind's not going to be liberated. You're going to have these strong feelings. So if you have this overwhelming anxiety and worry about the world, there's certain cravings there that are producing that. And then if there's this indifference about the world and you could care less or what happens to one person or another, that's the opposite side. And that's typically what the unenlightened mind is doing, is it just sees this black and white, these two opposite sides. So what the Buddha is inviting you to be able to see and then to also practice is the middle way, which is compassion in this example, is where you can practice the concern for the misfortune of others. And when you have concern for the misfortune of others, that means you have the mental state of this concern. Whether you choose to take action based on that concern is up to you. And in all situations, you're not going to necessarily take action in any particular situation. But if you maintain the concern for the misfortune of others, that's what the Buddha is teaching you and guiding you to be able to accomplish. To get rid of this worry and anxiety for the world, holding on to it, wanting it to be a certain way, or this indifference when people have misfortunes. Then there's sympathetic joy. The opposite of sympathetic joy would be jealousy or envy. What sympathetic joy is where you have joy for others' success, even if you didn't contribute to it. So in a situation where maybe you're at work and you're applying for a promotion or some new job at your company, and you and 3 or 4 or 5 other people are applying for that job or that new promotion, if someone else gets it and you're jealous or envious, in that situation, you're not practicing sympathetic joy. Or say somebody gets a new house, or maybe they get a new car, maybe they're going on vacation, or maybe they get a new husband or wife or boyfriend or girlfriend. If you're envious of that, that's because of your cravings. You're wanting that particular thing, and now the mind experiences this jealousy or envy because you want that to be you and it's not you. So the way that you antidote this, of course, is eliminating craving, desire, attachment with breathing, mindfulness, meditation, and generosity. But you also need to arise this sympathetic joy, where you have joy for other success, even if you didn't contribute to it. So if your coworker comes around and says, hey, I got that promotion, even if you applied for it and you were really interested in getting that yourself, you can say, hey, congratulations. I'm really pleased for you. That's wonderful for you. Or, hey, I'm going on that vacation that I've been planning. Hey, that's great. Congratulations. Or, hey, me and my partner just bought a new house. Hey, that's outstanding for you. I know you've been looking for that for a while. That's great. Even if you would like to have a new house too, and even if you feel a little bit of jealousy and envy in there, just try to arise this sympathetic joy in the mind and bubble it up so that more and more it becomes easier for you to practice. You might not experience the overwhelming sympathetic joy, the all-encompassing sympathetic joy that the Buddha is talking about here as you first start practicing sympathetic joy. But the way you get that to bubble up in the mind is you apply right effort from the Eightfold Path, to apply the effort to eliminate the unwholesome qualities of jealousy and envy and arise the wholesome quality of sympathetic joy. And this is what will help you to permeate that in the mind more and more and get rid of this jealousy, so that there's never a situation where you're jealous about anything, where anybody is experiencing any particular thing. You can just be joyful for their success. Then there's the equanimity. This is the fourth mental state. And what this is calmness and composure, even in difficult situations. So at any situation, you would like to have calmness and composure, because when your mind is shaken up and unsteady and unstable, you're going to make unwise decisions, and those unwise decisions are going to produce unwholesome results. So as the example I typically give is that, if you get a phone call that your mom was just in a terrible car accident and she's in the back of an ambulance being rushed to the hospital, well, if your mind's all shaken up in that situation and you grab your car keys and you bolt across town, and now you arrive at the hospital with your mind all shaken up, you're not in the best condition to be able to listen to the doctors and nurses to be able to now make some decisions that is going to help your mom. And you may have even gotten in a car accident yourself on the way across town, and now you're in the back of an ambulance too, right? So this isn't going to actually help you or help your mom in that situation. So that's why the Buddha is teaching you to get rid of your cravings, desires, attachments, because that's what's shaking up your mind. But you also need to bring in this equanimity where you have calmness and composure, especially in a difficult situation. So that now when you get that phone call, you understand that, hey, mom's health is impermanent. She's not going to be permanently healthy. It's not possible. And she's in the best hands possible. She's in the back of an ambulance with people who are skilled and understanding how to take care of her, and she's about to arrive at a hospital with doctors and nurses that are very trained in how to handle this situation. There's nothing you're going to accomplish by racing across town to hurry up and show up at the hospital. So just take your time, make your way to the hospital. When you show up, you can be calm and composed, listen to the doctors and nurses, understand what's happening, and then start making some wise decisions that's going to actually help your mom. That's what's actually going to help in this situation. So the Buddha is teaching you to practice this equanimity. So if your child falls and breaks their arm, if some other thing happens, you would like to always maintain your calmness and composure. Maybe a tree falls on your house, right? And your roof is crushed in. You would like to maintain your calmness and composure and figure out, what do I need to do in this situation? Because the only thing that's happening is impermanence. That's what's happening around you, is it's just impermanence. And if your mind's craving things to be permanent, when you experience this impermanence, you'll be shaken up by that. But as you get rid of your cravings, desires, attachments, you can maintain your equanimity more and more. And now this will lead to wise decision making. Because anytime you make any unwise decisions, it's always going to result in unwholesome results. So you would like to always be making wise decisions. But of course, you need to gradually build up to that as you're decreasing the pollutions of the mind. The root word here of equanimity is equal. So there's another component to equanimity, which is treating all beings equally and fairly. So if you're a parent, or you're a boss or employer, or even if you're just a coworker, or you're out and about in your neighborhood, you would like to treat everybody equally. If you had children and you treated one child one way and another child a different way, or if you treated one coworker one way and another coworker another way, like maybe you brought a gift from one coworker, but you didn't bring one for the other, this is going to produce jealousy in their mind, right? And now they don't understand that those painful feelings they're experiencing is being caused by their own cravings. They don't know that. But for you, if you're choosing to practice where you're not treating people equally, they can now vent those painful feelings at you. So not only is the Buddha teaching you these healthy mental states to eradicate certain unhealthy qualities of your own mind that can produce improved results if you eradicate them, but he's also teaching you how to navigate the world with a bunch of unenlightened beings around that have a bunch of craving. So when you bring a donut into work or a bagel and you just give it to one employee or one coworker, and now the other ones with their craving start getting jealous, they don't have the wisdom to realize that their jealousy is being caused by their own mind. And they don't have the wisdom to realize they should practice sympathetic joy. So in this situation, while you haven't caused their jealousy, the ramifications of that is that they're going to now, be angry and bitter and harsh with you, and you're going to find it difficult to work in this environment. So what the Buddha is teaching you is to treat everyone equally and fairly. So in this situation, I would suggest bringing bagels for everybody if you're able to do that. Or if you're not able to do that, then don't do it, right? Find some other way that you can practice generosity other than that. But if you're treating one child one way and another child a different way, there's going to be jealousy in the household, and now there's going to be complications. So by treating everyone fairly, then it helps everybody to see that you're being fair, and you're going to preserve the ability to reside peaceful and joyful because you're not going to have all this hostility and bitterness coming back to you. But by the time you get to enlightenment, if there is any hostility or bitterness that's coming at you, you would still be able to maintain your calmness and composure. Your mind wouldn't be shaken up by this. But on your way to enlightenment, you would like to be practicing in such a way where there isn't this anger and hostility and bitterness around you. By the time you get to enlightenment, you'll be practicing in a way that's not causing any harm to anybody. So therefore, you'll experience nothing but wholesome results that more and more people will be treating you lovingly and kindly and warmly and friendly. But of course, even as an enlightened being, you're going to have the occasional person who's bitter, harsh, and hostile with you. And your mind's not going to be shaken up by that if you're practicing equanimity. So that's what the Buddha is describing here in a lot of details, explaining to you the purification of the mind through practicing these 4 Brahma Viharas of loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. And they antidote specific issues in the mind. And you're going to need to get familiar with these and be able to apply the effort to arise them in the given situation. And this is where the Buddha is sometimes described almost like a doctor, that you see certain symptoms and you apply a certain prescription or a certain antidote. Well, the Buddha could easily be described that way, but also you can be described that way too. You are your own best doctor. If you see the symptoms of jealousy arising in your mind and you know the prescription or the antidote to that is sympathetic joy, then arise sympathetic joy, joy for their success. Or if you're noticing indifference with other people's misfortune, or if you're noticing anxiety or stress because of holding on to the world, if you know the remedy to that is compassion, then you can bring your mind to the middle. So you can use your mindfulness or awareness of mind to be able to see the symptom arising of anger and hatred and ill will, and now you apply loving kindness. Or you see that your mind is practicing where you're experiencing the shaking up of the mind, where it's a difficult situation and your mind is not calm. And if you see that symptom with your mindfulness and you know the antidote or the remedy or the prescription, you can apply this prescription because you are your own best doctor. Your teacher is not going to be there to say, hey, by the way, you're being a little jealous here. You should practice some sympathetic joy. You're going to need to be able to see that yourself and be your own doctor. So while other people refer to the Buddha as a doctor, you can be a doctor too. And you're going to need to be a doctor in order to be able to see these various symptoms and then apply a certain prescription. And that's where the real power in these 4 Brahma Viharas are. And if you're looking for more details on this, you can look at Volume 1, Chapter 14. That's where I explain the Brahma Viharas. I explain what they are, and I explain the remedies and the symptoms, so that you'll be able to know what the symptom is and you'll be able to know how to apply the remedy. So that's in Volume 1, Chapter 14, which I'm going to be discussing in the group learning program next Sunday. Not this Sunday, tomorrow, but the following Sunday will be in Chapter 14. So do you guys have any questions on this particular chapter? You can put it into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically and ask any questions that you like. So Helen is asking a question here. She says, Why does the mind even get jealous in the first place? So I'll just pause there because I see you have more. Is it's craving, desire, attachment. Because the mind craves something, right? Like if your friend is going on a great holiday and vacation, you're like, ah, man, I wish I could do that. The mind's having a craving. It's a longing. It's a yearning. It's wanting something. So anytime there's any discontentedness in the mind, whether it's jealousy or any other discontent feeling, even you're disappointed, or even you're missing your mom or something like this, it's always craving, desire, attachment. Anytime the mind is uncomfortable or discontent in any way, it's always craving, desire, attachment. The mind's longing, yearning for something, and then it's not getting what it wants, so it's experiencing painful feelings. But if it gets what it wants, it gets those conditioned pleasant feelings, and then it has this neither painful nor pleasant feelings as well. She goes on, she says, in most cases, someone having something desirable doesn't take away anything from us. For example, a person who lives in a beautiful villa doesn't influence my living conditions, or a healthy person doesn't take away from someone else's health. On the contrary, sympathetic joy logically makes sense because even if not me, at least someone is experiencing something good. It only adds to the global pool of happiness. Yeah, that's 100% accurate. And that's what you would like to keep in mind as you're learning these teachings and you're starting to practice them, is that something wonderful happening for someone else, it doesn't diminish you. It just, hey, that's wonderful. There's been a cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. They've made certain decisions that led to that particular thing. And you haven't made those decisions, and that's okay. If you don't have craving, no matter what anyone else is experiencing, you can have joy for their success. But if you have craving over here where you want things for yourself and there's this selfishness in the mind, then when you see some fortunate thing happening for someone else, there would be this jealousy that comes up in the mind. So you can eradicate that by arising sympathetic joy. Wherever you see envy or jealousy, always remember joy for their success, even if I didn't contribute to it. And then it just becomes so automatic that the mind becomes wired that way, that even if you were planning to go, I don't know, to Australia and you've been wanting to go there your whole life, and now somebody else says, hey, I'm going to Australia next week. Hey, wonderful. Congratulations. That's great for you. I'd be curious how it goes for you. Let me know when you get back, right? That'd be wonderful to have a conversation of how things went when you were in Australia, rather than feeling any kind of jealousy or envy, because it doesn't help you. It doesn't solve any issues. Instead, that's actually the problem. So getting rid of the cravings and then just having joy for other success, it allows you to be joyful when fortunate things are happening for other people, and it'll help create more harmonious relationships for you too. I'm going to be teaching the Brahma Viharas this week in the Harmony and Relationships course as well, because with the Brahma Viharas, it helps you to be able to cultivate harmonious relationships. Without them, you wouldn't be able to cultivate harmonious relationships. Yusuf, looks like you have a question.
Yeah, it is about the middle way of loving kindness. I have experienced my voice tone becomes at its maximum softness and calmness and kindness. I feel that it is weird so to have a so soft voice like this. My view to it is maybe my mind is craving that better state, like after meditating loving kindness, my mind becomes more soft and kind. So my mind tends to be more craving for that tone to be more like kind and soft. Or what would you say about it? Or is it just awkwardness because my mind is not used to that?
Yeah, the mind's not used to the impermanence that you used to talk a bit harsh or aggressive or hostile or bitter or whatever it was. And now there's been a change. And the mind doesn't like change. That's one of the ways to say the mind craves permanence, is that it doesn't like impermanence. It doesn't like change. So when changes start happening in your life, your mind's going to be a bit uncomfortable with it because it's not used to this. So the more that you talk this way and you see that it works, because I know that you're interested in having a girlfriend. You've talked about it many times publicly and privately as well. You're going to find that it's going to be much easier for you to have a girlfriend when you're talking soft and gentle versus harsh and bitter. And when you start seeing the results and the benefits of having talked gentle with so many people, and people start talking to you that way more and more, you're going to be like, wow, thank goodness I did this. But initially, it feels a bit awkward because the mind's not used to it.
Well, you mentioned that about the girlfriend, and I can say that it is maybe the ego is craving for more and more and more soft voice tone because it is very amazing. So am I still not correct here, or is it maybe the craving?
Yeah, you need to not have craving for a soft voice, but it's obvious that your voice has softened up a certain degree. So you just go with the flow, right? Like you don't have to crave it and you don't have to push it away, but just know that, yeah, you're going to become softer. You're going to become more gentle when you're doing loving kindness meditation and you're practicing the intention of harmlessness and all these other teachings that you're learning. The mind's going to soften up a bit. And this is a good thing because I'm sure in many situations where you were being rough and harsh and bitter, you were experiencing unwholesome results coming back to you from the people around you, where now more and more as you practice this way, you're going to see the improvement to your relationships. And this is where your mind's like, I kind of like this gentleness. I like this new way of being, because remember, the Buddha is not teaching you rules or commandments. He's teaching you how to get rid of those pollutions of mind. And that gentle voice is actually going to start occurring more and more naturally because the mind is thinking in more loving and kind ways. So the mind is the boss and the body is just going to follow along. So the speech that's coming out of the voice, that's just being produced by the body. But the mind is the boss. That's what's controlling all of this. So that's why when you are training your mind to be more loving and kind, the body follows along, just like an employee. And you're going to really appreciate that as you see more and more benefits in your life from having decided to practice these teachings, get rid of the pollution, and be more loving and kind. You'll see that you'll become more gentle and you'll have much better relationships around you. Okay, you're welcome, Helena. Pleased to help you. Okay, so we'll move on to this next chapter, which is chapter 82. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, Yihang, if you'd like to go ahead, ma'am.
Aspirations are not obtained by means of prayer. Householder, there are these 5 things that are wished for, desired, agreeable, and rarely gained in the world. What 5? 1. Long life. Householder is wished for, desired, agreeable, and rarely gained in the world. 2. Beauty. Householder is wished for, desired, agreeable, and rarely gained in the world. 3. Peacefulness. Householder is wished for, desired, agreeable, and rarely gained in the world. 4. Fame. Householder is wished for, desired, agreeable, and rarely gained in the world. 5. The heavens are wished for, desired, agreeable, and rarely gained in the world. These are the 5 things that are wished for, desired, agreeable, and rarely gained in the world. These 5 things, householder, that are wished for, desired, agreeable, and rarely gained in the world, I say, are not obtained by means of prayers or aspirations. If these 5 things that are wished for, desired, agreeable, and rarely gained in the world could be obtained by means of prayers or aspirations, who here would be lacking in anything?
I'm going to pause you there for a second, Yihang, and just kind of talk about what's going on, and then I'll let you finish out the rest. So what the Buddha is saying is that these 5 things are what people really want to have in the world. This long life, this beauty, this peacefulness, this fame, and then being reborn among the heavenly beings. And he's saying, hey, this is something that lots and lots and lots of people wish for, they desire, this is agreeable to them, but it's rarely gained. People rarely experience these things. That's what he's saying. And then he's saying these things aren't obtained through prayer, because if these things were obtained through prayer, who here would be lacking anything? Meaning that if we could just pray to some being and then magically we would be able to acquire whatever it is that we want, then who here would be lacking anything, because we'd have everything that we want. And what the Buddha ultimately teaches you in the totality of his teachings is that the way that you acquire anything in the world is through making wise decisions. That as you make either wise or unwise decisions, you're going to experience wholesome results or unwholesome results. If it was easy as sitting down and praying to some being and say, can I have a long life? Can I be beautiful? Can I have peacefulness? Can I have fame? Can I be reborn among the heavenly beings? If people were able to just pray for these things, the Buddha is saying, who would lack anything? Because we'd be able to instantly have this genie in a bottle that's going to give us anything and everything that we'd like to have. But what he ultimately teaches you in the totality of his teachings is that in order for you to acquire anything in life, it's through cause and effect, or action and result. It's through certain decisions. This is the natural law of karma. When we talk about awakening the mind to enlightenment, that's what you're awakening the mind to, is the natural law of karma, of cause and effect, or action and result. And having the wisdom of this natural law is going to lead to you making wise decisions that produces wholesome results. Because if you have wisdom of something like the natural law of gravity, that's why you choose not to jump off of a bridge or go to the 5th floor of a building and jump off. You choose to take the elevator or the escalator because you have the wisdom of the natural law of gravity. But if you lack that wisdom, you would maybe choose otherwise, right? So whenever you have wisdom of a natural law, like the natural law of karma, of cause and effect, you can see very clearly that anything you've experienced in life has all been a result of your decisions. So he's helping you to be able to see that, hey, just praying and asking some being or entity to acquire something isn't the way that the world works. This isn't true reality. But a lot of people in the world think that that's the case, that I can sit down and I can pray and I can ask for something, and then there's going to be some miracle that's performed, or like a genie in a bottle. And if somebody thought this way, their mind is having misunderstanding or confusion or this unknowing of true reality, this lack of wisdom. Some people refer to it as ignorance or misperception or confusion. So he's making it very clear that you can obtain things through prayer. And now he's going to go into detail about this. So go ahead, Yihang.
One householder, the noble disciple who aspires long life, ought not to pray for long life or excite in it or passively yearn for it. A noble disciple who aspires long life should practice the way conducive to long life. For when he practices the way conducive to long life, it leads to obtaining long life, and he gains long life, either heavenly or human. 2. Householder, the noble disciple who aspires beauty, ought not to pray for beauty or excite in it or passively yearn for it. A noble disciple who aspires beauty should practice the way conducive to beauty. For when he practices the way conducive to beauty, it leads to obtaining beauty, and he gains beauty either heavenly or human. 3. Householder, the noble disciple who aspires peacefulness, ought not to pray for peacefulness, or excite in it, or passively yearn for it. A noble disciple who aspires peacefulness should practice the way conducive to peacefulness. For when he practices the way conducive to peacefulness, it leads to obtaining peacefulness, and he gains peacefulness either heavenly or human. 4. Householder in the noble disciple who aspires fame ought not to pray for fame, or excite in it, or passively yearn for it. A noble disciple who aspires fame should practice the way conducive to fame. For when he practices the way conducive to fame, it leads to obtaining fame, and he gains fame either heavenly or human. 5. Householder, the noble disciple who aspires the heavens, ought not to pray for the heavens or excite in them, or passively yearn for them. A noble disciple who aspires the heavens should practice the way conducive to heaven. For when he practices the way conducive to heaven, it leads to obtaining the heavens, and he gains the heavens. For one desiring long life, beauty, fame, acclaim, heaven, high families, and lofty delights, following in succession, the wise praise motivation in doing deeds of merit. Being motivated, the wise person secures all kinds of good the good in this life and the good of the future life. By attaining the good, the steadfast one is called one of wisdom.
Okay, thank you, Yihang. So as we left off, the Buddha is saying, hey, it's not this prayer that's going to lead to any particular thing, because if it did, then who would lack anything? Because we would just pray and we would get everything. So here he's saying, okay, if you're interested in acquiring this long life, instead of praying for it, practice the way conducive of long life, which is to eliminate craving, anger, and ignorance. Because if you have anger in your mind and you're hostile and you're bitter and you're harsh, that's going to weigh on the body, and you're going to notice your heart and your lungs and all the other organs are going to give out sooner and sooner and sooner. So when you can train your mind to be joyful and peaceful, remember, the mind's the boss, the body's the employee, it's just following around. So if the mind is tranquil, the body is going to be tranquil. The Buddha talked about that a little bit in the previous discourse. Whereas if the mind is hateful and bitter and vindictive, that's going to put a lot of stress and strain on the body. So by training your mind this way and practicing the way conducive of long life, meaning making wise decisions and training your mind, that's what's going to produce long life, not praying to any particular being. That's not how you get long life. And the same thing is true about beauty, because when you're practicing these teachings and you're eliminating the pollution of your mind, you'll see that your mind brightens up, and also your facial complexion brightens up as well. That you'll notice that you become more beautiful, that your eyes will be brighter, your skin will be cleaner. You'll notice that your fingernails and your hair will grow better. And when you're grumpy and irritable and nasty, you're not going to have this beauty. So when you're practicing the way conducive of beauty, meaning you're training your mind, you're eliminating the pollutions, that's where you're going to see that beauty is experienced. And then the same thing with peacefulness, right? You can't pray to be peaceful. You need to be able to acquire that through learning and growing and developing, acquiring wisdom. That's what's going to produce peacefulness, by training your mind. So practicing the way conducive to peacefulness is what leads to obtaining peacefulness. That's what the Buddha is explaining here. Same thing with fame, and same things with the heavens, right? And the Buddha is not saying you should long and yearn for these things, because notice right here, he's saying don't even passively yearn for these things, meaning in the back of your mind have this kind of underlying passive yearning, this little passive craving for it. He's saying don't even do that, right? Just practice the way conducive to these things if this is what you need to actually acquire in your life. And then he gives you this kind of little bit of a summary here, where ultimately he gets to this point where he says about practicing merit. And if you remember what merit is this is where you are practicing the giving and sharing of more than is strictly required, such as your time, effort, energy, or resources, in the direction of continuation of the teachings of the Buddha. So you might be coming in contact with ordained practitioners or a teacher to be able to gain more wisdom about the path that leads to enlightenment. So that's what's ultimately going to lead to you cultivating wisdom of the practice, so that then if you're interested in a long life or any of these other things, you'll be able to acquire those things. But if you weren't practicing merit, meaning you're not coming in contact with somebody who's in one of the 4 stages of enlightenment, you wouldn't be able to cultivate the wisdom to be able to acquire one of these 5 things. So it's merit that kind of keeps things continuing to go, where people can gain wisdom to be able to learn how to practice in such a way that is going to produce these things. And then notice how the Buddha talks about wisdom here. He always really praises wisdom, right? By obtaining the good, the steadfast one is called one of wisdom, right? It's always about cultivating wisdom about the natural laws of existence, because that's going to lead to any kind of wholesome results in your life. If you stop learning at any point in your life, even when you're enlightened, an enlightened being is not going to stop learning, but let's just say, at any point in your life, if you ever stop learning, you're basically resigning yourself to know what it is you currently know. And if you're agitated and annoyed and frustrated, your mind's not enlightened yet, you're just going to relegate yourself to continue to experience those feelings over and over and over again. But if you can cultivate wisdom of the path to enlightenment through learning, reflecting to independently verify and practice, now with that wisdom, you can actually eliminate these discontent feelings and experience the improvement to the condition of the mind. It's not prayer that's going to produce any kind of wisdom for you, but it's through learning, reflecting, and practicing that's going to produce that. So let me know what questions you guys have here. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. So it looks like Helena has a question here. She's saying, perhaps sometimes prayer can work like placebo making it easier for us to rewrite subconscious beliefs and in consequence take wiser actions on the matter we prayed for. For example, someone is so convinced that the Indian goddess of abundance, I can't pronounce that name, Lakshmi, will bring a financial improvement, that in the end, they make it happen. Would you please comment on this? Yeah, the placebo effect there is that because they're praying to this being, and then they think that this being is going to provide it, but they actually go out in the world and they make wise decisions that lead to financial success. And now they attribute that to this goddess, right? Where in reality, if you look at what truly happened is they went to a job interview, they prepared well, they performed well, they did all the things that were wise to do, and they ultimately got that job and they got an increased salary. That's what actually led to it. It was cause and effect, or action and result. It was their karma, the wholesome results of their wise decisions. But there might be, because of their delusion, their confusion, their misunderstanding, attributing it to this goddess of Lakshmi. I think you're saying here, I can't pronounce it. But this is the delusion that the mind has, or the confusion. And as long as somebody's stuck in that confusion, then that means they're not necessarily cultivating the wisdom that it takes to lead to wise decision making and produce better and better results for themselves. So their mind stays trapped in this delusion or confusion or this lack of wisdom, this misunderstanding. And now, because they don't know what truly leads to improved results in their life, they just keep praying and praying and praying and praying. And the worse things get in their life, the more they just pray and pray and pray and pray and pray, instead of cultivating wisdom, which would lead to improvements in their life by making wiser and wiser decisions. So this is the actual problem that the mind experiences because of its lack of wisdom and unknowing of true reality. Okay. I'm not seeing any questions anywhere else in any of our platforms. So I'm going to move to the next chapter. And if anyone would like to volunteer to read this one, you can. Looks like Keely and Yihang volunteered. So Keely, if you'd like to take this one, maybe Yihang, you can take the next one.
Should a monk be involved with gold and silver? Whatever monk should take gold and silver, or should get another to take it for him, or should consent to its being kept in deposit for him, there is an offense of expiation involved for future. Whatever monk should engage in various transactions in which gold and silver is used, there is an offense of expiation involving future. Whatever monk should engage in various kinds of bartering, there is an offense of expiration involving future. In case a king or one in the service of a king or a Brahmin or a householder should send a robe fund for a monk by a messenger, saying, having got a robe in exchange for this robe fund, present the monk so and so with a robe. Then, if this messenger, approaching that monk, should say, Honored sir, this robe fund was bought for the Venerable One. Let the Venerable One accept this robe fund. Then the messenger should be spoken to thus by this monk. Sir, we do not accept a robe fund, but we accept a robe, if it is at the right time and if it is allowable. If this messenger should say to the monk, but is there someone who is a Venerable One's attendant? Then monks and attendants should be pointed to by the monk in need of a robe, either one who is engaged in the monastery or a household practitioner, saying, This is the monk's attendant. If this messenger instructing this attendant, approaching that monk, should speak thus, Honored sir, I have instructed the person whom the Venerable One pointed out as an attendant. Let the Venerable One approach at the right time, and he will present you with a robe. Then monks, if that monk is in need of a robe, approaching that attendant, he should stay there and remind him 2 or 3 times, saying, "Sir, I'm in need of a robe." If while stating and reminding 2 or 3 times, he succeeds in obtaining that robe, that is good. If he does not succeed in obtaining it, he should stand silently for it 4 times, 5 times, 6 times at the utmost. If he succeeds in obtaining that robe, standing silently for it 4 times, 5 times, 6 times at the utmost, that is good. If he, exerting himself further, succeeds in obtaining that robe, there is an offense of expiation involving of virtue. If he does not succeed in attaining it, he should either go himself to where the robe fund was brought for him, or a messenger should be sent to say, "That robe fund which you, sirs, sent for a monk is not of any use to that monk. Let the gentlemen make use of their own. Let your own things be not lost." This is the proper course in this case.
Okay, let me explain this one and then we can do the next part of the discourse. So here what the Buddha is describing is that he didn't allow any of the ordained practitioners to accept gold or silver. And this was the currency at the time, that the way he taught, whatever people did is up to them, but the way that he taught was to not accept gold and silver, any kind of currency. And the reason why is because he wasn't interested in them getting attached to the wealth. He didn't even accept land or animals. Sometimes people would try to offer him slaves or servants or women. He didn't accept any of these kinds of things. The only things that the Buddha accepted was food, clothing, shelter, and medical care. And the reason why is because he would live side by side with his students. They would invite him to come live in their home, and maybe for a week or a month or 2 or 3 months, he would live side by side with his students in their home, and then he would be there to be able to teach them, and they would ask and request teachings of him. So he had his food, his clothing, his shelter, and his medical care taken care of, and that's all he needed in order to survive during that time frame. And of course, there were certain times where the village would come together and they would ask the Buddha to teach, and they might feed him and give him food, and that's all he needed in order to survive. Where nowadays things are a bit different, that ordained practitioners and teachers, they do accept some financial contributions because we don't have a student there with us side by side all the time the way that the Buddha did. So there's times like I might need gas for my motorbike, or we need to pay electric or water at the temple, or we might need to buy some meditation cushions, and there isn't a student right there available to be able to do that. So oftentimes students nowadays, they make financial contributions to allow us to then go purchase the things that we need in order to share the teachings. And there's a certain amount of trust that a student has that their teacher is spending those funds in a way that is conducive to the continued sharing of the teachings of the Buddha. So here the Buddha is just essentially talking about this robe and saying, hey, we don't accept a robe fund, meaning like money in order to go buy robes, but we do accept robes. You know, those are the clothing that we accept. And that's what he's essentially talking about here. So then there's this other discourse, which is going to essentially hit on the same points and the same topic. So Keely, if you would like to read this, or Yihang, up to you guys how you would like to do it. Okay, Yihang, you would like to read it? Go ahead, ma'am. Or Keely, up to you guys.
I can continue.
Okay, sure.
Okay, another discourse. As he was sitting down at a respectful distance, Mandaka, the householder, spoke thus to the perfectly enlightened one. There are fortunate one. Whiteness roads with little water, with little food. It is not easy to go along them without provisions for their journey. A good, fortunate one. If the perfectly enlightened one allowed monks provisions for the journey, then the perfectly enlightened one on this occasion, having given reasoned talk, addressed the monks, saying, I allow you, monks, 5 products of the cows, milk, curds, buttermilk, butter, and ghee. There are monks, whiteness roads with little water. With little food, it is not easy to go along them without provisions for the journey. I allow you, monks. to look about for provisions for a journey, husky rice for him who has need of husky rice, kidney beans for him who has need of kidney beans, beans for him who has need for beans, sauce for him who has need of salt, sugar for him who has need of sugar, oil for him who has need of oil, ghee for him who has need of ghee. There are monks, people who have confidence and are believing. This deposit gold coins in the hands of these who make things allowable, saying, by means of this, give the master that which is allowable. I allow you, monks, thereupon to consent to that which is allowable. But this, monks, I do not say that by any method may gold and silver be consented to, may be looked about for. Now on that occasion the members of the king's company had assembled in the royal palace and were sitting together when the following conversation arose. Gold and silver are allowable for the ascetics following the Sakyan sun. The ascetics following the Sakyan sun content to gold and silver. The ascetics following the Sakyan sun accept gold and silver. Now on that occasion, Manikulaka, the headman, was sitting in that community. Then Manikulaka, the headman, said to that community, do not speak thus, masters. Gold and silvers are not allowable for the ascetics following the Sakyan sun. The ascetics following the Sakyan sun do not consent to gold and silver. The ascetics following the Sakyan sun do not accept gold and silver. They have renounced jewelry and gold. They have given up and used the use of the gold and silver, and the Manikulaka was able to convince that community. Then Manikulaka approached the perfectly enlightened one, paid homage to him, and sat down on one side. Sitting to one side, he reported to the perfectly enlightened one all that had happened, adding, I hope, venerable sir, that when I answer this, I state that what has been said by the perfectly enlightened one, and did not misrepresent him with what is contrary to the truth, that I explained in accordance with the teachings, and that no reasonable consequence of my statement gives ground for the criticism. For sure, headman, when you answered, thus you state what he has been said by me and did not misrepresent me with what is contrary to the truth. You explained in accordance with the teachings, and no reasonable consequence of your statement gives ground for criticism. For headman, gold and silvers are not allowable for the ascetics following the Sakyan sun. The ascetics following the Sakyan sun do not consent to gold and silver. The ascetics following the Sakyan sun they have renounced jewelry and gold. They have given up the use of gold and silver. If the gold and silver are allowable for anyone, the 5 courts of sensual pleasure are allowable for him. If the 5 courts of sensual pleasure are allowable for anyone, you can definitely consider him to be one who does not have the character of an ascetic or of a follower of the Sakyan sun. Further, headman, I say this, straw may be sought by one needing straw. Timber may be sought by one needing timber. A cart may be sought by one needing a cart. A workman may be sought by one needing a workman. But I do not say that there is any method by which gold and silver may be consented to or sought.
Okay, thank you so much, Keely. So the Buddha would set up a certain guidance of what it takes for individuals to get to enlightenment. And one of the things that he was setting up for his ordained practitioners, because they were living in the homes of their students, is, hey, you don't need money. You don't need gold or silver or any kind of riches. That he was interested in his ordained practitioners sharing teachings based in generosity, which is the giving and sharing of their time, effort, energy, and resources without any expectation of anything in return. So what the Buddha is saying is, there's no reason why we need to collect money from our students, because we're just practicing generosity. They're practicing generosity to allow us to stay in their house, to feed us, to give us clothing, to give us medical care, and we should be practicing generosity in order to share the teachings with them. And in no situation should we collect money from our students. And this is something that we practice nowadays, because if I put a price on the classes and the courses and programs and retreats that I share, there's only a certain number of people that would be able to afford those. The people who are disadvantaged beings that are struggling in the world the most, they wouldn't be able to pay for those courses. So right away, you're alienating a certain portion of the population that really actually needs these teachings the most because they're struggling. And then also, if I were to charge for classes, courses, and retreats, then I'm not practicing generosity and you don't get to practice generosity either. Whereas if you're practicing generosity to give and share and help me to continue to share these teachings, then it's helping you to get closer and closer to enlightenment. So that's why the Buddha taught this way, is that it's unwise to accept gold and silver during his lifetime because you didn't need it at that time. Nowadays, we need some financial support in order to be able to accomplish the things that we need to accomplish, but we don't allow the mind to have craving, desire, attachment to the money, that whether your bank account balance is up or it's down, you can be completely content. Whether somebody offers to give you money as a student or not, you can be completely content either way. And you're willing to teach that student no matter what, whether they're making financial contributions to you or not. And anybody who's enlightened or close to it would understand this, and they wouldn't put prices on their courses. Because as soon as you put a price on your course or your class or your retreat, you're alienating a certain portion of the population that's not able to be able to access your teachings. And how could that be a practice of loving kindness and compassion towards all beings if I charged $1,000 for a 5-day course? I wouldn't be able to service the people who need the teachings the most. And the people aren't practicing generosity at that point. They're just providing a certain fee for a certain service. They're not practicing generosity. It's like, here's $1,000, give me this 5-day course. The mind hasn't let go. It's not practicing the elimination of craving, desire, attachment. So the Buddha wisely set things up the way that he did because there wasn't any need for gold or silver or these kinds of things during his lifetime. And then also the Buddha taught that ordained practitioners can't keep food overnight, that in order to sustain your life as an ordained practitioner, you needed to walk out in the community in the morning and collect food. And then you would eat that food that day, and then any food that was left over, you weren't allowed to keep it. And this was the way that people would sustain their life in terms of ordained practitioners. And they still practice this even today. And the reason why the Buddha instituted this is that this brought the ordained practitioners and householders close together, that they would need to interact on a daily basis. Because if these ordained practitioners were off in the world somewhere, tucked away in some remote temple, and they're just learning and practicing and training their mind and getting to enlightenment, and they were cultivating their own food, they would have no need to come and teach the household practitioners. So the Buddha created this mutual support that means that the ordained practitioners and the people who are learning the teachings the most deep were able to then come in contact with household practitioners through this daily giving of food. So that way the ordained practitioners are practicing generosity and the household practitioners are practicing generosity daily and interacting with each other so they can cultivate wisdom. But what the Buddha is talking about here and what this person's asking him is like, hey, when we go these really long distances from town to town, there isn't really food in between, and it's hard for us to be able to get food when we're traveling from one town to the next. And the Buddha says, okay, well, in this case, I'm going to allow you guys to have these 5 products that will allow you to essentially sustain your life when you're going through this period of time where food is hard to come by. And he provided these things that he's talking about here. So this is what the Buddha is talking about. Ultimately is that he didn't have his ordained practitioners accept financial support, which was gold and silver, because they didn't need it. But also he was saying, hey, if you would like to use these particular products from town to town on these rare situations, go ahead and use those things to help sustain your life. But otherwise, you're coming in contact with household practitioners every single day in order to get the food that you need. And then everybody's practicing generosity to be able to get closer and closer to enlightenment. So let me know what questions you guys have here, and I'll be pleased to help you guys. All right, I'm not seeing any questions here. So I'm going to move on to the next chapter. The next chapter is chapter 84. Okay, looks like Yihang would like to read that one. Go ahead, ma'am.
Giving thanks. Now, at that time, monks did not give thanks in a dining hall. People looked down upon, criticized, spread it about, saying, "How can these ascetics, sons of Sakyans, not give thanks in a dining hall?" Monks heard these people who spread it out. Then these monks told this matter to the perfectly enlightened one. Then the perfectly enlightened one, on this occasion, having given reason to talk, addressed the monks, saying, "I allow you, monks, to give thanks in a dining hall. I allow you, monks, to give thanks in a dining hall through a monk who is an elder. I allow monks, 4 or 5 monks who are elders or next in age to the elders, to wait in a dining hall. I allow you, monks, if there is a reason, to go away, having asked permission from the monk immediately next to you."
Okay, thank you, Yihang. So this is a really important teaching for ordained practitioners, because oftentimes when household practitioners are making offerings to ordained practitioners, they actually don't say thank you. I see this regularly, even in my life, when I sometimes give offerings to ordained practitioners, they don't even say thank you. And this is really unfortunate. And this is one of the reasons why in those particular environments with those particular ordained practitioners, oftentimes the support for their temple goes down and down and down and down and down. And they might be struggling to be able to get food for themselves to eat. They might be struggling to get robes. They might be struggling to pay the electric and water at their temple. And this is the cause and effect, that if someone gives you a gift and you don't show appreciation and gratitude, why would they continue to give you gifts? Because obviously these people are unenlightened. They're maybe giving gifts because they're not yet practicing pure generosity, where they're expecting a thank you. And they would like to see that gratitude and that appreciation coming from the ordained practitioners or teachers. So it's really wise that whenever anybody's giving you anything, not just as an ordained practitioner, but even grandma gives you a gift at Christmas, of course, we say, "Thank you, grandma, I really appreciate this," right? We learned this growing up. But sometimes in the ordained community, they're taught that they're above household practitioners. And this is conceit, and this is actually hindering them from actually getting to enlightenment. So if you went up to an ordained practitioner and you why'd them, they typically won't why you back. Or if you give them a gift, sometimes they don't say thank you back. And this is unfortunate, because more and more people are going to be turned away from the teachings of the Buddha because they think that's the way that people are actually taught to practice, when the Buddha never taught this. You can see here that the Buddha is teaching people to give thanks in the dining hall where people are being fed, right? So they would have a particular place where these ascetics, these ordained practitioners would be able to go and be able to receive food from the community. And the Buddha is saying, hey, you guys should give thanks. That's essentially what he's saying when he says, "I allow you." It's not like he's giving them permission. He's saying, hey, it's okay if you give thanks to the household practitioners for the food and the gifts that they're giving you. And this would be really wise for anybody, not just an ordained practitioner or a teacher, but even, if your boss gives you a gift, or a coworker gives you a gift, or your friend gives you a gift, to say thank you and show a gratitude and appreciation. Because you don't necessarily know what the state of someone's mind is. And if they have craving in there and they're wanting a thank you, and you don't say thank you, their mind is going to become discontent. And that painful feeling that they're experiencing, they're going to attribute it to you. And they're going to think you're the one that's causing their frustration because you didn't say thank you when they gave you a gift. And now they're going to tend to push you aside, and you're going to end up finding that your relationships are broken. So when you practice politeness, kindness, friendliness, and respect, you can easily say thank you. But unfortunately, as I mentioned, there's a lot of conceit in some ordained communities, and they think that they're above the household practitioners, and they think that they might deserve these gifts and that they don't have to say thank you, and they don't need to show appreciation and gratitude and respect to household practitioners. But I would suggest that they do just the opposite. And if you're finding that you're struggling with getting offerings as an ordained practitioner or teacher, you're struggling with certain challenges to receive certain offerings that are going to help you to continue to be ordained or continue to support your temple and so forth. This is the reason why. Because of the conceit, putting yourself above people and looking down on them and choosing not to say thank you in these situations, people are going to turn away and not be interested in continuing to support you. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this particular chapter. Okay, I'm not seeing. Oh, it looks like Yusuf, you have a question. Go ahead, sir.
I do not have a question. I just wanted to read.
Oh, okay. Sure, I'll let you read this one. Very short chapter.
An invitation to accept. When a monk is not ill, an invitation to accept a request for 4 months may be accepted, unless there be a renewed invitation, unless there be an ongoing invitation. If one should accept for longer than that, there is an offense of wrongdoing.
Okay. Thank you, Yusuf. So here, as you guys heard me share, is that during the lifetime of the Buddha, the ordained practitioners would live right alongside of their practitioner or their students. So a student would maybe come and they would build up a relationship with you, and then they would say, hey, I would like to invite you to our home. And they would give you an invitation to sleep at their home, and then they would take care of you, and they would treat you really well and give you food and shelter and clothing and medical care and things like this. And the Buddha is saying, hey, if you're not ill, you shouldn't stay for longer than 4 months unless they renew the invitation, right? So the Buddha is kind of giving this guidance to help them to see that don't wear out your welcome, right? This is kind of a saying in the Western world or in English is don't wear out your welcome. Right. So if somebody invites you to come to their home, the Buddha is saying, hey, don't stay for longer than 4 months, which was during that time an appropriate amount of time. And he's saying, unless you're ill, right? If you're sick, you can't just pick yourself up and walk away. There needs to be some kind of conversation there for this renewed invitation, right? That's what the Buddha is explaining here. So let me know if you guys have any questions here. Yes, Yusuf.
What is that meaning of this reference?
What does what mean?
Of the reference here, the book from the discipline, Vinaya.
Oh, this reference here? Oh, okay. So the Vinaya, this is the code of the ordained practitioner. So there's 3 baskets in terms of the Pali Canon. There's the Vinaya, which is the code for the ordained practitioners. There's the suttas, which is the discourses of the Buddha, where he's describing how to actually get to enlightenment. And then there's essentially the Dhammapada, I think is what it is. So there's these 3 baskets that we refer to. And the Vinaya is the code for the ordained practitioners of how to be a monk and the things that you should and shouldn't be doing. It talks about like how to wear your robe. It talks about like not being alone with someone of the opposite gender, in a closed room and things like this. And it's to help kind of protect them a bit more and get them deeper in their practice.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Yihang, you have a question? Go ahead, ma'am. Oops, clicked the wrong button.
Thank you, Teacher David. I actually have a question for the previous chapter. Could you please go back to that one?
Sure.
Thank you. I was thinking there were last 2 lines were 4 or 5 monks who are elders or next to the elders who wait in a dining hall. And I allow you monks if there is a reason to go away, having asked permission from the monk immediately next to you. Okay. Because I was understanding in a way that I felt like it put a sort of hierarchy here, like for elders who are next age, and then when go away asking permission to the monk immediately next to you. Why was these 2? I was a bit confused. Could you please explain?
Yeah, so there's a certain respect for elders, meaning people who have been studying longer than you, that their wisdom should be more cultivated than you in this particular case. And he's saying, okay, I allow you 4 or 5 monks who are elders or next in age to the elders to wait in a dining hall, to, just wait there and hang out essentially, rather than like people loitering in the dining hall. He's kind of saying, okay, you elders, if you would like to hang out here, this is something that, you might decide to do. And then I allow you monks, if there is a reason, to go away, having asked permission from the monk immediately next to you. I guess they must have had some kind of thing where they would spend time together and then they would leave together. But perhaps in certain situations, someone would need to leave and they would politely ask the person next to them, like, hey, is it okay if I head out and leave? And this is the way that the Buddha taught them to be able to practice.
I see. So it's a little bit like a social networking occasion?
Yeah, because during the lifetime of the Buddha, they didn't have the educational background that we have. Like we go to elementary school, middle school, high school, and different variations of that, and college and university. Those kinds of things weren't established 2,500 years ago. So some of these people that were ordaining with the Buddha, they might have come to start learning with him when they were like 5, 6, 7 years old or 8 years old. So he was essentially their stepfather, and he was teaching them all kinds of things about the world and social interaction and things like this. And some people would come later in life, of course, and learn with him later in life. So he was giving them all kinds of education about many things, even basic mannerisms and things like this of, like, if I'm at lunch with a student, I might say, hey, I need to go back to the temple and get something set up. Do you mind if I head out? And, I'm ending the conversation where we might have went to lunch together and maybe their mind was expecting me to stay there all the way until they were done eating, when in reality, I need to head back to the temple and actually set up a live stream or something like that, because it takes a little bit of time. So I might just say to the person, I'm not asking permission, so to speak, but I'm just kind of like making sure their mind is comfortable and has let go and they're not holding on to me being there with them. And this helps you to preserve your relationship. Whereas if I was to just get up and leave and walk away, they could become discontent if they were attached to me. And now if their mind isn't having very much wisdom, they might attribute those feelings to me. And now they're mad at me, thinking I'm the one who's causing their anger. So a wiser way to practice, remember the Buddha is teaching you how to navigate this world of unenlightened beings, is like, hey guys, do you mind if I head out? I need to go do something. I'll catch up with you guys later, right? This is what you might do with your friends. And this is a very wise practice.
Thank you very much. Very clear.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Let me see if we have anything else coming in. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. So let's go to the next one. If someone would like to volunteer for chapter 86. Okay, Yihang.
Responsibilities of a teacher. Monks, when a cattle walker possesses 11 factors, he is capable of keeping and caring for a herd of cattle. What 11? Here a cattle walker has wisdom of form. He is skilled in characteristics. He removes flies, eggs. He dresses wounds. He smokes out the sheds. He knows the watering place. He knows what it is to have drunk. He knows the road. He is skilled in pastures. He does not milk dry. And he shows extra veneration to those bulls who are fathers and leaders of the herd. When a cattle walker possesses these 11 factors, he is capable of keeping and caring for a herd of cattle. So too, monks, when a monk possesses these 11 qualities, he is capable of growth, increase, and maturity in the teachings and discipline. What 11? Here a monk has wisdom of form. He is skilled in characteristics. He removes fleas, eggs. He dresses wounds. He smokes out the sheds. He knows the watering place. He knows what it is to have drunk. He knows the road. He is skilled in pastures. He does not milk dry, and he shows extra veneration to those elder monks of long standing who have long gone forth, the fathers and leaders of the community. And how is a monk skilled in characteristics? Here a monk understands as it really is, thus an unwise person is characterized by his actions. A wise person is characterized by his actions. It is in this way that a monk is skilled in characteristics. And how does a monk smoke out the sheds? Here, a monk teaches the teachings to others in detail as he has heard it and learned it. It is in this way that a monk smokes out the sheds. And how does a monk know the watering place? Here, from time to time, a monk approaches those monks who are learned, hears to the heritage, experts on the teachings, experts on the discipline, experts on the outlines and inquiries of them. How is this, Venerable Sir? What is the meaning of this? Those vulnerable ones then disclose to him what has not been disclosed, clear up what is obscure, and dissipate his perplexity about numerous perplexing points. It is in this way that a monk knows the watering place. And how does a monk know what it is to have drunk? Here, when the teachings and discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata are being taught, a monk gains inspiration in the meaning, gains inspiration in the teachings, gains joy connected with the teachings. It is in this way that a monk knows what it is to have drunk. And how does a monk know the road? Here, a monk understands the Noble Eightfold Path as it really is. It is in this way that a monk knows the road. And how is a monk skilled in pastures? Here, a monk understands the four foundations of mindfulness as they really are. It is in this way that a monk is skilled in pastures. And how does a monk not milk dry? Here, when dedicated householder practitioners invite a monk to take robes, alms food, lodgings, and medicines and provisions for the sick, a monk is moderate and in accepting donations. It is in this way that a monk does not milk dry. And how does a monk show extra veneration to those elder monks of long standing who have long gone forth, the fathers and the leaders of the community? Here a monk maintains bodily, verbal, and mental acts of loving kindness, both openly and privately toward those elder monks of long standing who have long gone forth, the fathers and leaders of the community. It is in this way that a monk shows extra veneration to those elder monks of long standing who have long gone forth, the fathers and leaders of the community. Possessing these 11 qualities, a monk is capable of growth, progress, and fulfillment in these teachings and discipline. Here only 8 of the 11 factors are shared, as these 8 apply to generosity and gratitudes. See included reference for the entire teaching.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Yihang. So there's a whole discourse here that the Buddha gives, and I'm just including the ones that relate to generosity and responsibilities of a teacher, because these are things that a teacher is going to need to know in order to practice and be able to share teachings with students. And there's other things as well, too. But what you can see here is that the Buddha is relating this teaching to herding cattle and being a cattle worker, because this is something people would have understood at that time of being a cattle worker and what it takes to be a cattle worker. So relating his teachings to something people already know helps them to remember what it is that he's teaching. So here he relates it to that. And in here he's talking about these characteristics, right? The characteristics of a cow that a cattle worker is going to need to understand in order to be a good cattle worker. The same thing is true to be a good teacher or a good practitioner, wholesome and wise. You're going to need to know what is unwise and what is wise. And you're going to need to see that through actions, not through people's spoken words. And then when he talks about smoking out the sheds, this is a monk teaches the teachings to others in detail as he's heard it and learned it, that you haven't changed the teachings of the Buddha. One of the worst things you could ever do is change the teachings of a Buddha. it's going to harm you and it's going to harm countless other people. Unfortunately, over 2,500 years, that's a lot of what has happened. But by you sticking close to the original words of the Buddha and somebody who's not changing what the Buddha taught, then you'll be able to understand it. And as a teacher would aspire to teach in the way that the Buddha actually taught. Then there's knowing the watering places. And this is where an individual would, as a cattle worker, know where to take their cows to get water. And this is going to nourish them. And here the Buddha is talking about that in relationship to his teachings, that you would know where to go to experts in the teachings and be able to learn the teachings. And you would be willing to actually do that where you would experience the clearing up or clarity of any kind of misunderstandings related to the teachings. And then knowing what it is to have drunk, because if you have cows and you take them to drink water, you need to know when they're done and they've drunk enough water. And the same thing here, the Buddha says that when the teachings and discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata are being taught, that a monk gains inspiration in the meaning in the teachings, and there's this joy connected to the teachings, and that's having drunk, having taken in the actual teachings. And then knowing the road, because you would need to guide these cattle to a certain direction. You would need to know the road. Well, the road in the teachings of the Buddha is the Eightfold Path. Anybody who's interested in sharing teachings to help people get to enlightenment based on the teachings of the Buddha, you would need to know the Eightfold Path inside and out as a teacher, like the back of your hand, because ultimately your students are going to need to know that in order to get to enlightenment. If a teacher isn't teaching the Eightfold Path, there's no way for them or their students to actually get to enlightenment. This is the path. This is the road, the Eightfold Path. And then the pastures, this is the 4 foundations of mindfulness. This is a real priority in one's practice and for a teacher as well. Again, you wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment without the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So a teacher would need to understand the 4 foundations of mindfulness and be practicing them so that they could then teach them to their students, and their students would be able to practice those as well. And then here, and in connection to generosity, and the reason why it's in this book, is that a teacher needs to not milk dry, right? If you have cows and you just keep, milking them and milking them and milking them, eventually they're going to get dry of milk and they're not going to produce any more milk. Well, if as a teacher or an ordained practitioner, you just keep taking offerings from your students, even though they might be struggling, this is going to dry up their resources, and they're not going to be able to provide their basic necessities for themselves to sustain life. So a teacher would wisely be teaching generosity from the middle way, where you're teaching your students to practice generosity from the middle way, where they're not, having craving, desire, attachment, and longing, yearning, and giving excessively, but also they're not indifferent to generosity either, because otherwise that would be selfishness. You would like to teach your students to practice generosity from the middle way. But as a teacher, you need to understand that your students aren't enlightened, that they do have craving, and they might be practicing generosity in excess amount. And you need to make sure as a teacher that you're accepting donations in moderation. And this might mean that you need to talk to your students a bit. Like there's different situations where one time I had a student who their wife had recently got laid off of their job. And this student had been learning with me for about 8 or 12 months. And they said, "Hey, David, I would like to give you some offerings now that I've been learning with you for such a period of time." And I said, "Well, maybe this is something you should think about and you consider a little bit more, because your wife just got laid off of work and maybe you're not going to have the money that you need to take care of your household bills." And, the student took a few days to think about it, and ultimately they decided to make an offering. But as a teacher, I wasn't going to just accept that offering, because maybe this person would be struggling and maybe they're just having craving to make an offering to me. So I suggested to them that they step back and think about it. And there's been some other situations like this as well. So as a teacher, you need to be aware of your students. And if your students are learning closely with you, you would know a bit about their life and their background. And if they're making some offering to you, you might need to check in with them and make sure that they're okay to make that offering, because they may or may not be practicing generosity from the middle way. And it's wise for the teacher to be able to then ensure that their students are doing that and kind of advising them. You're not forcing them, you're not controlling them, you're not precluding them from making a gift, but instead you're just checking in with them to make sure they put some thought behind this, that they're not practicing craving along with their generosity, because in that situation, they're going to be making unwise decisions that is producing unwholesome results. And then ultimately what the Buddha talks about in relationship to a cattle worker and then his actual teachings is that here, like a cattle worker would venerate the bulls and the beings who are, long standing in this herd. The same thing is true here. The Buddha is saying in terms of the individuals who are deeply practicing the teachings, that you would maintain bodily, verbal, and mental acts of loving kindness, both openly in the public and privately towards anybody who's been practicing the teachings for a long period of time, because those are the individuals who are going to ensure the teachings continue in the world. Whereas if you didn't have loving kindness and compassion and thoughts of positivity into your mind for people who are practicing the teachings for a long period of time, and not just the time that they're practicing, but that they're practicing them deeply, then you're not really respecting that the teachings are coming into the world in a way that you can gain the wisdom of these teachings. So the Buddha is talking about showing respect and gratitude towards people who have been practicing the teachings for a long time, because it takes a certain amount of effort and energy to be able to do that. And by individuals choosing to do that, that ensures the teachings come into the world in such a way that it benefits countless people in the world. So let me know what questions you have here. It looks like Yusuf, you have a question. Go ahead, sir.
My question is related to the discourse in the last video about generosity. Is it okay to ask it now?
The last video of generosity, what are you referring to?
Being joyful before and after giving and sharing.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, you're welcome to ask any and all questions you like.
Okay. Yesterday, I made a huge generosity, so the mind tends to be discontent, of course. I didn't know the results of generosity so that I can tell it to myself, to motivate myself that this generosity that I made is beneficial. Can you please say the benefits of generosity?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's countless benefits with generosity, which are in this book, and you can go through and read it. There's many different benefits. But the primary benefit is that your mind's eliminating craving, desire, attachment. That's what you would like to do. And that's why you like to frequently practice generosity. You're not interested in giving one big gift a year. This isn't actually helping your mind as if you would have spread that out over frequent offerings. So there's many different benefits, but the primary one is elimination of craving, desire, attachment, which is ultimately going to eliminate your discontentedness because your mind's not holding on to things.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Yihang, I see your comment there that you think this story and this analogy and this metaphor is pretty cute. And yeah, it is actually. I actually used to herd cattle when I was a young kid, so I understand these things. All these different analogies that the Buddha uses, I understand all of them because I used to work on a farm when I was growing up. So I understand all these analogies that he uses and all these different things that he talks about is so clear for me because of having had these experiences. Okay, let me check to see if we have any other questions or any other things that we need to discuss. I don't see anything anywhere. So let's go to the next chapter, which is chapter 87. And it looks like Yusuf would like to read that one, and Keely as well. So looks like Keely put her hand down. So go ahead, Yusuf. There's one more after this, Keely, so maybe you can read that one.
Is it okay if Keely wants to read that?
Actually, there's two more after this. But go ahead, Yusuf, since your mic's open. Keely can get the next one, and there's a one after that as well.
Okay. Who should you not teach, and who should you teach? Monks, someone with 6 features is unable to enter the sure path with regards to skillful qualities, even when listening to the true teachings. What 6? When the teachings and practice proclaimed by the perfectly enlightened one is being taught. 1. They are not interested to listen. They are not actively listen. They do not apply effort to understand. They learn the incorrect meaning. They ignore the correct meaning. They adopt views that contradict the teachings. Someone with these 6 features is unable to enter the sure path with regards to skillful qualities, even when listening to the true teaching. Someone with 6 qualities is able to enter the sure path with regards to skillful qualities while listening to the true teachings. What 6? When the teachings and the practice proclaimed by the perfectly enlightened one is being taught, 1. They are interested to listen. They actively listen. They apply effort to understand. They learn the correct meaning. They ignore the incorrect meaning. They adopt views that match with the teachings. Someone with these 6 qualities is able to enter the sure path with regards to skillful qualities while listening to the true teachings. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Yusuf. So here the Buddha is giving guidance of individuals that can be taught and individuals that can't be taught, because you might think that a Buddha would teach everybody, and a Buddha is open to teaching everybody and anybody. But a Buddha also knows that there's certain people that you can teach. It's not possible to teach, particularly if their ego is up and you can't get through their ego. There's just no way. It's like a brick wall. And here the Buddha is kind of essentially giving you some guidance of specific things if you are interested in being a teacher, of to know who would be wise to actually teach and who would be unwise to teach. So if someone's not interested to listen to the teachings, why would you teach them? So if you're finding yourself trying to force the teachings on your brother, your sister, your life partner, your children, they're not interested in listening to the teachings. They're not going to be able to learn and practice and develop to be able to get to enlightenment because they're not even interested. In order to get to enlightenment, an individual is going to need to make 1,000,001 decisions walking towards enlightenment. And if they're not even willing to make the first decision to be interested in listening to the teachings, they're not going to be able to get to enlightenment, because they're not going to choose to meditate. They're not going to choose to do all the other things that you need in order to actually be able to get to enlightenment. So if someone's not interested in listening to the teachings, no reason to teach them. They do not actively listen, right? You need to listen with eager ears, which is what the Buddha teaches, is to listen to the teachings with eager ears instead of just being on your mobile phone or listening to a YouTube video with, while your teacher's talking, those kinds of things. If you're not actively listening, it would be unwise to teach that kind of person. They do not apply effort to understand. There's a certain amount of effort that goes into understanding the teachings. Or they learn the incorrect meaning, right? That they're not able to grasp the correct meaning. And oftentimes you need to be very patient with students, that oftentimes a student is applying effort to understand, but they are just not understanding. They're having the incorrect meaning. So with craving, desire, attachment in the mind, with all these other pollutions in the mind, sometimes a student will really find it difficult to learn the teachings. And as a teacher, you need to be very patient and be able to see that they might not be intentionally learning the incorrect meaning, but they're just having pollution of mind that makes it hard for them to learn the correct meaning. They ignore the correct meaning, that when they're pointed out to them over and over and over again of what the correct meaning is, they just ignore it, right? This would be unwise to teach this person. And they adopt views that contradict the teachings, right? If somebody thought that other people cause you to be angry, then this would be unwise to continue to teach this person, because they haven't even been able to investigate the very first teaching of the Four Noble Truths to understand that it's your own mind that causes your anger. It's not other people that cause that, for example, right? Or other views that they might adopt that are contrary to the teachings. So here the Buddha is giving a teacher guidance on this, because it helps as a teacher to know who to actually teach and who not to teach, because you'd like your time to be used in a valuable way. And the Buddha is showing you this cause and effect, that as a teacher, that you're going to be more effective as a teacher if you practice sharing teachings with people who can be taught, meaning they're interested to listen, they're actively listening, they're applying effort to understand, they're learning the correct meaning, they're ignoring the incorrect meaning, and they're adopting views that match with the teachings because they've reflected and they've investigated the teachings, they've independently verified them, and that's why they're adopting these views. They're actively on the path. So the Buddha is saying that in order for somebody to get onto the path, when they're listening to the true teachings, they would need to have these six skillful qualities. And that's what's going to be the best use of your time as a teacher, to practice where people are interested in the teachings. They're actively listening. They're applying effort to understand. They're learning the correct meaning. They're ignoring the incorrect meaning, and they're adopting views that match with the teachings. So for me, I'm open to teach any and all people, even when people come and learn with me at the temple. If they're on their phone and they're, sleeping or whatever, I don't say anything to them. If they would like to come to the temple, even if they hear one sentence and they just hear to practice loving kindness and being loving and kind to your friends and family, and they go out and do that, that's very good for their welfare and their peacefulness for a very long period of time. So in my opinion, I don't turn students away. But if somebody was repeatedly disrespectful to the teachings, to their classmates, to the teacher, we'd have to sit down and have a few talks. And over time, if they improve this conduct, wonderful. But ultimately, if they got to a point where they're just not improving their conduct, I might need to ask them to not come back. And out of all the years that I've been teaching the teachings of the Buddha, I've never had to do that. So there's people who are essentially very polite and very respectful who are coming to learn. There have been people who have been disrespectful at different times, but typically that's a once situation and then they just don't ever come back, right? And that solves itself. But as a teacher, it's wise to know who would be best to teach and who would not be best to teach, because that way you can be the most successful in sharing the teachings and helping people get to enlightenment. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this particular chapter. This is 87. Okay. I don't see any questions here. And by the way, this is actually helpful not just about the teachings of the Buddha, but this is like any kind of teaching that you might do, right? You would like to look at these same kind of things. This will be really helpful for you. Okay, so Keely, you had a question, or you would like to read. If you'd like to read this one, you're more than welcome to.
Yes, I can read, David.
Perfect.
Reasons why a business surpasses focus of fails. Honorable Sir, 1. Why is it that for one person here, the business he undertakes ends in failure? 2. Why is it that for another the same kind of business does not fulfill his forecast? 3. Why is it that for still another the same kind of business fulfills his forecast? 4. And why is it that for still another the same kind of business surpasses his forecast? 1. Here, Sariputta, someone approaches an ascetic or a Brahmin and invites him to ask for what he needs, but does not give him what was requested. When he passes away from there, if he comes back to this world, whatever business he undertakes ends in failure. 2. Someone else approaches an ascetic or a Brahmin and invites him to ask for what he needs. He gives it to him, but does not fulfill his needs. When he passes away from there, if he comes back to this world, whatever business he undertakes does not fulfill his forecast. 3. Someone else approaches an ascetic or a Brahmin and invites him to ask for what he needs. He gives it to him and fulfills his needs. When he passes away from there, if he comes back to this world, whatever business he undertakes fulfills his forecast. 4. Someone else approaches an ascetic or a Brahmin and invites him to ask for what he needs. He gives it to him and surpasses his needs. When he passes away from there, if he comes back to this world, whatever business he undertakes surpasses his forecast. This, Sariputta, is the reason why for one person here, the business he undertakes ends in failure. For another, the same kind of business does not fulfill his forecast. For still another, the same kind of business fulfills his forecast. And for still another, the same kind of business surpasses his forecast.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So remember, the Buddha is teaching you this cause and effect, or this action and result. He's helping you to be able to see what certain decisions you make that lead to any particular outcome. So if you have been experiencing difficulties in a business, the Buddha is explaining to you the reason why this occurs so that then you can practice the opposite. So if your mind is doing what the Buddha describes here, which is someone approaches an ascetic and Brahmin and invites him to ask for what he needs, meaning you go up to an ordained practitioner or a teacher and say, hey, what do you need? What is it that I can offer you? And sometimes students will actually do this. They'll ask you like, hey, is there anything that you need? And then if that person shares like, hey, I need this, or I need that, or I need this, but then that person who asked doesn't actually provide that particular thing, then the Buddha is saying, okay, then your business when you come back into the world is going to end in failure, because there's a certain amount of craving, desire, attachment there, that it's not just a mystical, magical thing that you have craving in your mind that you've asked, say, hey, what do you need? And then you chose not to give that particular thing. So the mind is having a certain amount of selfishness. So in your next life, you're going to be operating through craving, desire, attachment as well. And now that's going to end in difficulties within your business. And then the Buddha goes through successive situations where someone has asked for, hey, what do you need? And someone doesn't fulfill that. And then, the Buddha's going through that. And ultimately what he's getting to here is that someone asks like, hey, what do you need? And not only do they fulfill it, but they surpass that. They give even more. And this is why a person being generous, they're going to be very successful in life. That this is one of the benefits of practicing generosity. You'll see that you'll be very successful in your life when you're practicing generosity. So this is the Buddha showing the cause and effect of why businesses succeed and why they fail. So do you guys have any questions here? Okay, it looks like Yusuf is asking, what if that student just wasn't able to offer it after saying he can? Isn't that misperception? So what the student can do is they can come back to the aesthetic or to the teacher and say, hey, I know we had this conversation and I was planning to give you, 5 apples, but unfortunately I've had some challenging times and I'm not going to be able to do that. I really apologize, right? This is the way that you would be wise to handle that. So what the Buddha is describing here is not a misperception. He's describing the cause and effect, that the natural law of karma is affecting you whether you're aware of it or not. So if you're asking someone like, hey, what do you need? And then you don't provide that and you just walk away from the situation, then there's a certain amount of craving in your mind, where if things change, which is reasonable and understandable, there's impermanence, then you go back to the person and say, hey, I'm so sorry. I was planning to give you this, but I'm unable to do so. And this is a wise way to practice. Okay, let me see if we have any questions coming in anywhere else. All right, I don't see anything anywhere else. So let's go to the very last chapter of volume 13, which is the very last chapter of the entire book series. And next week, we're going to be starting from volume 2, chapter 1, from the very beginning of the group learning, or of the Pali Canon and English study group. So if Yihang, it looks like you would like to volunteer to read this, so you get the honor of reading the very last chapter.
Thank you. Thank you very much. 8 causes and conditions for the destruction of families. I remember 91 eons back, headman, but I do not recall any family that has ever been destroyed merely by offering cooked alms food. Rather, whatever families there are that are rich, with much wealth and property, with abundant gold and silver, with abundant possessions and means of subsistence, with abundant wealth and grain, they have all become so from giving, from truthfulness, and from mental discipline. There are, headmen, 8 causes and conditions for the destruction of families. 1. Families come to destruction on account of the king, or 2. On account of thieves, or 3. On account of fire, or 4. On account of water, or 5. They do not find what they have put away, or 6. Mismanaged undertakings fail, or 7. There rises within a family a spendthrift who squanders, dissolves, and wastes away its wealth, and 8. Impermanence is the 8th. These are the 8 causes and conditions for the destruction of families. But while these 8 causes and conditions for the destruction of families exist, if anyone speaks thus of me, the perfectly enlightened one is practicing for the elimination of families, for the misfortune of families, for the destruction of families. If he does not abandon that assertion and that state of mind, and if he does not let go of that view, then according to his own consequences, he will be, as it were, dropped off in hell. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. This is a pretty interesting chapter that is the very last one of the book series, where the Buddha is basically talking about these are the 8 things that destroy families, because there were certain people during the lifetime of the Buddha that were claiming he was destroying families because, men and women were leaving the household and coming to ordain with him in order to get to enlightenment. And someone who's attached, maybe a grandparent or a neighbor or maybe children or something like this are attached to their parents and thinking, hey, it's the Buddha that's destroying our families. When in reality, it's these people who are choosing to leave their home. The Buddha didn't force them to leave their home. They chose on their own. So the Buddha is showing this cause and effect, like, hey, this is what actually causes the destruction of families. And here he's talking about on account of the king, right? A king would have a lot of power. And maybe today we might think about the government as stepping in and, taking the wealth of a family. This could destroy a family. The thieves could do this, right? They could come in and destroy a family, or fire or flood, things that the Buddha is talking about here. And the eighth one is impermanence. And that's essentially what people are experiencing, is that they're choosing to leave and go into the ordained life. And then this is what people was actually claiming, that it was the Buddha that was destroying families. And he's saying, hey, if they don't eliminate this particular view, then they essentially are going to be reborn into the realm of hell, because this is a certain amount of craving, a certain amount of wrong view. Because he talks in other teachings where he talks about not associated with himself, but if you have wrong view, meaning you think that other people are causing your discontentedness, that he says you're going to be reborn into hell or the animal world. Well, this is the same thing here, that he's just relating it to himself. And it sounds pretty harsh. Some people, when they read this, is like, whoa, that's pretty strong. If they don't eliminate this view that the Buddha is destroying families and they're going to be reborn in hell. Well, the reason why is because they have wrong view, that they think that this family member who's choosing to leave and go ordain, that it's the Buddha who's destroying the family. Well, it's not the Buddha who's destroying the family. It's the family. The family could choose to stay together. Just because mom or dad has left doesn't mean that the family needs to dissolve. So in this situation, the person has wrong view, that they're not understanding the causes and conditions that lead to the painful feelings that they're experiencing, and they might be blaming it on the Buddha. And because of that wrong view, they will likely be reborn into the hell realm or the animal realm. And that's what the Buddha shares about in his teachings. So let me know if you guys have any questions here in this particular chapter. Okay, let me just take a look here. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So what I'm going to do is just end this particular class and end the Pali Canon English study group after 1.5 years of teaching from volumes 2 through volumes 13 by just saying thank you. And I appreciate all your kindness and all your support to help me in this program. Those of you guys that read, those of you guys that ask questions, those of you guys that have practiced generosity with me to be able to help me and support me to be able to share the teachings the way that I do. It's been 1.5 years that I started this program, all the way back at the very beginning of the program. We started at volume 2. We made our way all the way through all 13 volumes. And if you're interested in learning all the different teachings from this book series, then we're going to be restarting this next week on Saturday from the very beginning, volume 2, chapters 1 through 10. And you can download these books for free. You can take it and go print it. You can get printed versions through Amazon if your country has access to Amazon, or if you're here in Chiang Mai, you can get them at the temple. So you can start reading these, the words of the Buddha. You can read the words that I share as well to be able to help you build up your practice. And I suggest that you have a foundation in the teachings of the Buddha already well established, either through our group learning program or one of our foundational courses or retreats that I offer, that'll ensure that you have the best opportunity to be able to learn and practice the teachings. But I'd like to just thank you for your dedication and diligence to learning, whether you've just started learning in the last couple of weeks or you've been learning for a couple of years with me. Thank you for choosing to learn the teachings of the Buddha, because it's helping you, it's helping those close to you, and it's helping all of humanity, because you're becoming a kinder, more gentle, more loving person, which means there's less and less harm in the world for people to have to deal with. So thank you for your contribution to the program, and thank you for your contribution to the world of becoming a more loving, kind, and gentle person in the world. If you'd like to join this program, as I mentioned, next week, I'm going to be starting from the very beginning. And then tomorrow, I'm going to be in the group learning program in this book, Volume 1. We're going to be in Chapter 13, which is teaching you how to identify your cravings and almost surgically go in and remove them. So I'm going to be teaching that tomorrow at 9 a.m. at the temple here in Chiang Mai, and then at 9 p.m. at home as well. So you can read the chapter beforehand, but then I'm going to teach it to you in a way that you can directly apply it to your life. Because so far, what I've been teaching in the group learning program is how to generally eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments. But now we're going to teach you how to go in and surgically remove these. So if you would like to join that or any of our classes or courses, we have a course starting on Monday, which is Harmony in Relationships. That starts at 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Thai time. And I'm going to be live streaming that as well. And it's recorded, so you'll be able to watch it through the recording on our YouTube channel or our Facebook group. And within probably like 3, 4, 5 weeks, I'll have it up on the podcast as well. So have a very wonderful and lovely rest of your day. Perhaps we'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Take care and be well. Sawadee krap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.